Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're here to talk about EBT, nutrition incentives, and specifically kind of the process of getting authorized and picking your technology so that you can enable these programs at your market or on your farms. So we're here to present with the Nutrition Incentive Hub, and we are from the Farmers Market Coalition as a partner of the hub. Our work is really dedicated to supporting farmers market operators. Our goal is to strengthen markets across the US so they can really serve as strong community assets and provide income opportunities for growers. So we provide education and technical assistance. We provide some advocacy for our partners as a membership-based coalition. And we're also a network. So we facilitate market managers, vendors, and customers in sharing ideas and really growing the field. So my name is Katie Myrie. My position with FMC is a technology research manager. What I do with FMC is I support grantees under the GusNIP program, as well as farmers and other farmers markets, in really finding the right technology that works for them with a specific focus on EBT technology. So we're going to get into that today. But before we start, I want to introduce Rachel really quickly.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Ward. I'm the Farmers Market Support Project Manager at FMC, and I really help to manage projects within the Farmers Market Support team. I'm currently really focusing on FMC's work as part of the Nutrition Incentive Hub, which revolves around nutrition incentives such as SNAP matching programs at farmers markets, farm stands, and CSAs. And so I help to facilitate and lead that work in partnership with the Ecology Center out of California and Michigan Farmers Market Association, as well as other partners within the Nutrition Incentive Hub. And I will pass it back to Katie to get us started.
Great, so let's get started. Today we're going to talk about EBT technology and getting authorized and really setting up from a holistic perspective, a great program to accept EBT and incentives at your market. So FMC has been part of the Nutrition Incentive Hub's work to create this fantastic resource that is the Farm Direct Incentives Guide site. And really the guide site is a great space to start your journey on EBT with your market or your farm. And they put out this great framework called the Piper model that we're going to be using today as our kind of framing of our work together. So the model it's called the Piper model. It starts with plan, then it goes to implement, then promote, evaluate, and reiterate. So today we're going to be using a version of that and kind of focusing on the first four parts of that section or that process. We're going to start spending time, in the early stage of planning. So we're going to talk about how to do capacity assessment at your market or in your community. We're going to talk about planning the right administrative and financial systems to really make sure that when you set up your EBT program, you're doing it right. We're going to talk about a few different kind of market models that you can consider for accepting EBT and incentives. And then we're going to move to implement. So what does it mean to get authorized from FNS? How does that process work? We're going to talk about some of the accounting best practices and choosing the right technology. And then Rachel's going to close us out to talk about promoting and evaluating to make sure that we're creating, inclusive markets that we, are very close to the data on. So we understand the impact we're creating and we're able to replicate the programs that really work well. So before we dig in, just to ground ourselves in the history of EBT. So EBT was formerly known as food stamps, which emerged in the 60s here in the US. It's administered by the USDA, the US Department of Agriculture, and specifically within the USDA, it's overseen by FNS, which is called the Food Nutrition Services. So the food stamp program has a lot of history in the US. And starting in the 90s and early 2000s, we started to see farmers markets piloting the first script and token system using EBT. So electronic benefit transfer is what EBT stands for. And that's where we started to see farmers markets changing their model from the food stamp paper system to what we see today, which is a script and token based system. And formally in 2004, we saw the transition fully to EBT. Required in all 50 states. So we saw food stamps completely phased out and transition to electronic benefit transfer, which involves a lot of different technologies than a food stamp system does. So we're going to get into that a little bit more today. So with this transition from food stamps to electronic benefit transfer, we saw the emergence of the central terminal model, which I think many of you are familiar with in your markets. This model functions kind of like this, where a shopper will come up to an info booth or a market manager booth with their SNAP card. They'll swipe that SNAP card and receive tokens, script, or another kind of currency to then take that money and go throughout the market to spend with vendors. So that this is where kind of incentive models are managed through this model, as well as just normal, typical EBT programs. So this is probably the model that many of you are familiar with, but we'll get into a couple alternatives in a few minutes here. So how does this process work? Before we get into the details of assessment, it's also, we thought, helpful to kind of lay out the process overall. So first, we just talked about USDA and FNS. They're the folks who manage the whole SNAP authorization. They have the authority to authorize you as a retailer, whether you're a farmer's market or a farmer, to be able to accept SNAP as currency. And then once you get authorized, you're able to work with this third-party processor, and they're the kind of tech folks that manage the transaction itself. So you'll typically engage in a contract with a third-party processor who makes sure that you can accept SNAP legally and that the flow of dollars is going into the right bank account. These third-party processors also might be the folks that sell you your EBT terminal. So we've got the Verifone device right there that some of you might be familiar with, or maybe you've seen it at a retail store or a restaurant. These are the kind of devices that markets can use to accept SNAP. So it's not so, it might be familiar to you already. And finally, once you get all these three pieces, you get your authorization, you find a processor, and you find your device, then your market can begin accepting EBT. But if only it were that simple. There's a few more steps we need to consider as we kind of get started. So a couple examples of the types of models that markets use to enable EBT at their markets. The first is the central terminal model, which I just kind of shared a couple slides ago. Under this model, the farmer's market is the one who's authorized to accept SNAP. And this is what we call the single swipe model, where shoppers are going to swipe their SNAP card at the info booth and then receive tokens or script that they can then spend along their needs with eligible vendors. The key with this one is that vendors need to be trained in accepting currencies for the right eligible foods. So your vendors need to know what's SNAP eligible and what isn't. But this is a nice partnership between a large group of vendors that aren't individually authorized in a market that's able to get that authorization. This system also involves reimbursement. So vendors will have to bring the tokens or script back to the market manager for counting and reimbursement at the end of the market. So another example is a very similar model, but instead of the market manager being the one authorized, instead a community organization is authorized. So this is a really great option for markets who don't have the administrative bandwidth to really manage this whole program themselves. So we see this happening in some communities around the country. There's examples. This one is actually from California, and you can work with a food bank, maybe a nonprofit, could be a community center, foundation, or insurance companies in your region, and they can maybe partner with you to actually administer that SNAP program on site at your market. And finally, the third example, this is one where vendors are authorized. So the farmers and other food vendors are the ones who gain their SNAP authorization, and they're able to accept SNAP and get immediate disbursement of funds from FNS to their accounts. So, we have a couple examples of community-based markets and farms here with some quotes. I think the key here is that, you can encourage farms in your community to accept SNAP because that'll help open up doors for them to accept SNAP in other settings outside of your market. And it's just a nice way for them to increase their revenue stream and also being more inclusive of more types of currency at different income levels. So a lot of folks, when they come to me, they ask, what do I need and how do I pay for it? And these are kind of at the heart of probably why you're here. But I would encourage you to look a little bit more broadly at this process. What we like to do is kind of assess the need that you have within your market model, take a look at your capacity and see where your strengths are, see where you might have some gaps or weaknesses, and then look at what you have as an existing administrative and financial system. These pieces are going to be really key to running a smooth SNAP program. From there, then we can think about those different examples that I just shared about. The market manager authorized, the community-based organization authorized, and the vendor-based system. And we kind of imagine what that might look like at your market and how the reimbursement systems could work. It's only then when we have this sense of, kind of what is our internal capacity and what do we plan to do on site, it's only then that we can kind of pick the right systems that work for us. And once we choose those systems, then we can decide, how much do I need to pay for it and how am I going to get those funds? So first, we're going to kind of ask ourselves, what does the community need for SNAP? Who are the other organizations or partners in your community working with folks who are using SNAP as a currency, and what are their current barriers? Is your market a good fit to be a support system for those shoppers? And just kind of getting that sense more broadly what your community needs. From there, you can kind of start looking internally and think about what you need as a market to fill that need. So some of this is administrative related, right? So we need to get set up as an FNS authorized retailer, and we need to be able to pay for it. So some of the pieces that you might need, that you will need to get set up, is you need something called a responsible official on your FNS paperwork. This person will be the one who kind of shepherds you through that process. And I really want to encourage you to think long-term on this. Is this responsible official, a really strong community member? Will they be part of your organization for a long time? And are they reliable and responsive? This is really important because they're going to be the only person that can make changes to your application. And thinking through that before you go through the process is very important. So from there, when you identify your responsible official, you'll also need to think about things like a checking account. So that money's got to flow somewhere. And then it's got to flow somewhere else, right? You've got to flow in from FNS, and then from the state EBT program, and then it's got to flow out to your vendors. So you'll need to have a checking account as well as a reimbursement system to pay those vendors. Finally, you'll need an address for the FNS application. This is one tip that a lot of folks don't realize. The FNS really relies on the mail. So they will send you updated information about your application by the mail. And so it's really important that you have an address, a PO box, something that really will reliably take your mail. And a lot of markets don't have a physical address, right? So thinking through this is going to be very important. Moving forward, thinking about the resources that you're going to need to enable the EBT transactions. We're going to get into some of the costs of technology a little bit more later, but there's a huge range in what it's going to cost to run one of these programs. So I have some kind of ballpark costs here, considerations to make, which I'll get a little bit more into later. But just think about the kind of resources that you're going to need. You're going to need to pay for the tech. You're going to need to pay some kind of annual fees potentially. And then you're also going to need to pay your on-site operations staff, as well as account for that off-site administrative tasks that happen throughout the week to do those reimbursements and to do the accounting. So those are just kind of ways to consider what kind of capacity you have now and where you can kind of move some capacity around to pay for the program and pay for the staff. So I like to encourage folks to think about, what strengths do you have in your community right now? Do you have a strong fundraising board that is really excited about paying for this? Are there grants available in your area? One program in particular to help pay for equipment is called Marketlink, and we'll be sharing a little bit more about Marketlink later. But again, looking into your community to see what's the best strategy based on what you have available locally, which, this could include county agencies or public health organizations as well. So we talked a little bit about capacity for the staffing of the program, but now we're just going to take that a little bit deeper. So we're going to want to assess, do you have somebody who's available to run on-site operations, or is this going to be somebody that you have to hire in addition? Do you have a pretty low capacity team? Is there a way that you can kind of look to your volunteer network? Or are you a pretty high capacity, high resource market that really needs to pick the right technology, right? So those are two very different scenarios where you might be a low capacity market that really needs to rely on community members to run this, or you could be a market who's really interested in data collection associated with this program. So just remember that there's all these tasks that have to do with on-site and administration, including the promotion, right? So we need to share that we're running a program like this, and those all take time and potentially take financial resources. I talked a little bit about partnerships in the previous slide, but I really think, again, thinking more holistically beyond just resource sharing, like what are your relationships in your community and who can help you, who can help support you in getting this work off the ground as you're sharing through promotions that you are SNAP enabled, and you're making sure that your shoppers have a great experience. There are ways to help that process go more smoothly in partnering with an organization that has a history of this work. So again, look to your community ecosystem and develop those partnerships. One thing that we haven't talked about a whole lot is vendors, right? So, how many vendors are part of your market that are SNAP eligible currently, and are they excited about this idea? This is really important because you might have to do some work with your vendors to encourage some excitement around a new program and something that's different for them potentially. So make sure you have time to have communication with your vendors and really work with them to get them ready for this new program. And one question as a consideration here is, if your vendors are really excited and could benefit from authorization, could they be the ones who get authorized? This is a question that might have to do with the size of your market, the number of vendors that are there. So just, consider, could those vendors be the authorized parties as well? And finally, connectivity. So this is one piece that often gets forgotten. You need strong internet signal to be able to process EBT. So this could involve Wi-Fi, could involve cellular connections, an Ethernet connection, but connectivity is really, really important. So make sure that you kind of know your cell phone signal at your market to get a sense of, what are my options for picking technology? Is this program going to have outages because we have tough relationships with the cell tower? We're between two tall buildings, or we're rural where we don't have strong cell phone signal. So that will drive part of your decision on your technology that you choose to. So assuming you've done kind of all that internal introspection, you've kind of considered your capacity, you have some plans, you kind of are familiar with the requirements, you're ready to get SNAP authorized, right? So here's a little bit of an overview. It's not comprehensive, but here's just kind of a sense of the process and what you might need. So first, what you're going to do is create an online USDA FNS account and fill out that application. The things you'll put on that application are in part, your address, your responsible official, and all of that, which is down below. But you'll also need photo ID and social security card in many cases. So it depends on your market structure, whether or not you'll need a social security card, but just a heads up that you might need verifying documents during that process. Then you'll mail your supporting documentation like that photo ID. Well, I guess I don't know if the photo ID gets mailed in, but you'll be sending that supporting documentation into FNS to complete the whole application. You can check the status of your application online, or you can contact them if you have specific questions. And typically this takes a range of time. For some folks, it takes longer if they don't have, the complete file sent in at the time of the first mail correspondence, but I've heard anywhere between 4 and 8 weeks, sometimes longer. So make sure you have this planned out to leave plenty of time ahead of your season, because as you can imagine, there's a flood of applications in the springtime when markets are ready to get started. So we've gotten authorized, we're all set there. Now we got to pick technology, right? The good news is there's a lot of different options out there. So we'll talk through a few of those and you can kind of get a sense of what might be the right fit for your market. I like to break these down into wired, wireless, and mobile. And what you'll notice when I talk about these devices is they won't look too different from each other. You'll see a lot of the same devices showing up on different pages. The reason that is because the wired, wireless, and mobile, that title refers to its connectivity. So knowing what your connectivity options are is so important for your market to pick the right device, because your device needs to be able to send the right signals using the right internet connections. And so depending on what your market setting is, one of these devices from any of these categories could work for you. So first, we'll talk about mobile terminals, because this is kind of the device that we see coming on to markets, more rapidly as of late. We're seeing a lot of smartphone-based devices, and TotalPay Go is one example of that you can use your own device and download an app to process transactions. We're all familiar with that kind of system through Square that our vendors might use. This is very similar. It functions like an app. So again, these devices use cellular networks like AT&T, Verizon. They function like a cell phone in some ways, even though they might not look like a cell phone like that that Verifone device. So the key here is to make sure you have an understanding of what that cellular plan is going to cost you before you pick your device. So you want to know what it's going to cost, and you're going to want to know that it's reliable in your region as well. You'll also want to select a device that is able to run on a signal that's 4G or later. A lot of markets this year have had 3G devices that are now no longer supported. So just want to signal that's very important that you find a device that's capable of 4G, or 5G would be even better. Next is wireless. So in this case, these devices run on Wi-Fi. So you're probably familiar with Wi-Fi. And the key here is to make sure that you have a wireless signal that's strong enough. And the really important thing is you want to make sure you have a private connection. So you want your wireless connection to be secure and what they call PCI compliant. The reason for that is you're transmitting transaction data. So we want to make sure that you have security there. And PCI compliance is a big part of EBT and credit cards as well. So you can ask your third-party processor about this when you engage in a contract with them. And finally, wired. So this one is, I think, old school on this one, right? Many grocery stores use wired terminals that are able to plug into a wall jack that will be able to connect to an internet or phone line connection from there. These are great devices because they're really simple and reliable. They have a wire connecting them, right? So they're fantastic, and they won't be as vulnerable to weather, but they might be outdated, and you might not have an option as a farmer's market, right? Because you don't have, an inside location for your market. But if this is an option for you, I'd really encourage you to look into it because they are really great, reliable connections. So we talked a little bit about the technologies and then kind of budgeting for buying your EBT device. I wanted to share a little bit more specifically about the costs here. So the processing fee on the right here, we have an example of a contract from a third-party processor. And I really encourage you as markets to, if you're looking at these different third-party processors, ask them to send you a sample contract. This is really, helpful in kind of visualizing and being able to, anticipate all the different fees that might come with this. This particular third-party processor has, the transaction fee for credit cards at one rate, and then EBT transaction fee at another rate. So really making sure you understand those differences so you can be aware of what the cost is of running the program at the volume that you run or that you anticipate to run is really important. There's a couple other fees that might change between third-party processor to third-party processor, such as the regulatory fee, the statement fee, the monthly fee, customer support fee, all of that. Some have one-time fees, such as the setup fee, and then you can, some third-party processors offer to sell you the equipment outright, or they might rent it to you. So again, this is just an example, and these rates could have changed quite a bit since I got this quote, but again, just really encourage you to reach out to your third-party processor and get a strong sense of the financial and monthly or annual expenses that'll be associated with your device, as well as your EBT processing. On the left side, we have a different example. So I mentioned the TotalPay Go app on the phone. So with Marketlink, which is a program within NAFMMP, they actually pay for 2 years of the cost here. And you won't see a complicated statement like this for TotalPay. Instead, it's broken down to a monthly fee to cover the software. And they do not charge transaction fees. So you can do the math on what these programs might cost in comparison and figure out what's right for your market and make sure that the technology that they use really fits your market. So there's some options beyond what I mentioned earlier about paying for it. So I talked about, looking to community organizations, looking for regional and federal grants, looking to, your board and your community for different fundraising capabilities that they have. But state contracts are a huge opportunity, and many states actually will pay for the cost of equipment. This is a map that might not be completely up to date at this point, but many states you can see here in green, they have a state contract with their EBT program that includes no cost wireless equipment, as well as service for those accounts. So there are options in many states. And for those states who have no option, Marketlink is a good fill-in for that. So Marketlink is a bring your own device-based program. So farmers and farmers markets are eligible to get a free program fee for a year included. So they'll pay for that software fee for the first year. They'll get you a Bluetooth reader, and that software will be able to be used on your own device. So if you're a farmer at a market and you're already using your smartphone to take Square payments, for example, you'll be able to add this quite easily to that system. So Marketlink is a great option, and I encourage you to look into eligibility on that. We also get asked if folks can sell Snap online. The answer is possibly soon. We don't know. We're hoping that it will be online within the next year in some cases, but we just don't know yet what eligibility will look like for that. And again, Marketlink is working on this. And this is just a screenshot from their recent press release back in January. So make sure you pay attention to Marketlink's updates on their online Snap options, and FMC will be sharing those as we become aware of them as well. So finally, we've picked the device, we've got the program plan going, we're ready to kind of get this program up and running. What do we need to do on the accounting side to keep the market legal and liability free? There's a lot of requirements that are listed here that are required for markets to be able to properly account for the token program that they're using, as well as the reimbursements that are managed. So if you're using a token-based system, your tracking system should accurately monitor first how many tokens you have on hand at any given time. So kind of keep that sense of, in our box of token currency, how much do we have here? Because that money can be, or those tokens can be used as cash during the market. So having a sense of how many you have on hand is really important. Also track, the tokens that you distribute during the market day. So how many tokens do you have on hand, and then how many tokens go out to shoppers? At the end of the market day, the data point is how many tokens are returned. So what are the amounts that you need to reimburse to vendors for those tokens that were spent? And then, many shoppers might take a couple extra tokens home if they didn't spend them, bring them back for a later shopping trip. So how many tokens are outstanding or unredeemed, which means they might be still with your shoppers at any given time. So these 4 data points kind of help you figure out what's going on with your tokens and where they are. And you can use a range of tools to make this possible. You can use spreadsheets, you can use some of the softwares actually account for this. So there's a lot of options here, and there's a lot of creative ways that market managers have solved this challenge. So I'll turn this over to Rachel now, and she's going to talk about promoting and evaluating your EBT program.
Thanks, Katie. Such a great overview of all the different ways to get authorized. And I'm here to talk about really once you have your machine and you've thought through some of these systems for setting up your SNAP program, how do you make sure that you promote it and you evaluate it and you continue to reiterate and make it successful? So promotion is often one of the most overlooked aspects of building a SNAP or SNAP incentive program. In most places, it's really not common knowledge that you can use SNAP benefits at a farmer's market. So the onus to promote the program really falls back on your farmer's market team or you as a farmer to do that promotion. And word of mouth is often how we hear that customers learn about being able to use their SNAP benefits at the market. And it can be a really hard thing to measure, but there are a lot of different ways that you can facilitate word of mouth promotion. And there is a promotion guide on our Farm Direct Incentives guide site, which is at farmdirectincentives.guide. That has a lot of excellent resources that can help you figuring out how to promote your program. Some ideas to get you started. So first, community involvement. Hopefully you've already connected with some customers that use SNAP at the beginning of this process to really justify why you're building a SNAP program. But if not, doing some asset mapping or community conversations can really help you understand where and how to reach folks that use SNAP. And make sure that you try to stay away from monoliths and assumptions that are rooted in stigma around SNAP. There are so many different types of people that use SNAP, and that population is constantly changing. So some markets choose to create community advisory councils or community ambassador programs that can really assist them with grassroots outreach. And there's a great webinar on grassroots outreach and community ambassador programs on the promote section of the Farm Direct Incentives Guide site that you can go check out. Secondly, think about partnerships. If your market organization doesn't already have close ties to low-income communities, you can really lean heavily on partners that do and work with them to spread the word. Some ideas for who you could talk to might include your county SNAP office, your local food pantries or food banks, unemployment offices, local schools and Head Start programs, places of worship, community centers, etc. And really figuring out how you can work with those partners in ways that aren't extractive of the community. So making sure it's a give and take, it's an equal partnership. And some example partnership activities might be giving folks flyers to hand out or talking in a class, or it could be even as complex as organizing tours of the markets and everywhere in between. So really figuring out what level of involvement you want to have with your partners. Third thing to think about is you definitely need some materials to spread the word about the program, and creating some flyers or working with your state's network to get in on their marketing materials and handing them out everywhere you go is a great way to promote your program. Every time that you promote your farmer's market or your farm, you should be talking about how you accept SNAP as well. Make sure that it's really loud and proud on your website, in your presentations, on your market banner, etc. The language that you use is really important as well. Do some testing with community members that use SNAP at the market to find language that resonates with them without perpetuating any stigma or stereotypes. And remember really that people are more than the method of how they're paying at the market. So we at FMC try really hard to use SNAP to describe the way that folks can interact with the market, not who they are as a person. So for example, instead of saying a SNAP recipient, we say a customer paying with SNAP. And just those sorts of shifts can really make a change in how effective your messaging is. Once you're at the market, it should be really clear to anyone walking in that one, you accept SNAP, and two, where that customer needs to go to learn more. Make sure that your information booth has signage that says that you accept SNAP. You should have signage at every vendor booth that shows forms of payment that they accept. That can really help people in navigating where to spend their tokens or their script. Make sure you train all your staff and your vendors to be friendly and open to all customers and to intervene and call out when they see microaggressions or discriminatory treatment, and really creating some code of conduct type guidelines for your market and calling out how you treat folks who are paying with SNAP or tokens specifically can be a good approach. And then final point underneath promotion is really thinking about the population that receives SNAP, as I said, is constantly changing as folks ebb and flow between jobs. They may have their renewal expire, life circumstances may change. So for this reason, it's really important that you're always promoting your SNAP program, not just at the beginning of the season. You want to promote the program even to customers who don't currently use SNAP, because we've found that many SNAP sales come from customers that started coming to the market long before they ever started to receive federal nutrition assistance. And that's the way that they found out about the program, is because it was just widely promoted. So that is it for the promotion piece. Another great aspect to think about your SNAP incentive program is evaluation. You want to know if your program is reaching the community that you want to serve, if it's generating revenue for your vendors, if it's worth the administrative costs and time that you're putting into it. There is an evaluation guide on that Farm Direct Nutrition Incentives Guide site that can help you get started. And some of those questions to think through are, first figure out what types of data you want to collect. There's lots of different information that you could collect. So try to determine what makes the most sense for you and your market. Figure out what questions you want answered, and then collect the data to answer those questions. So really trying to be intentional about any data that you collect should be for a reason. And then you want to turn around and share how that data will be used when you're collecting it. So that folks have a good idea of what they're contributing to and where it will be used. Some examples of different types of data that you could collect from different populations. So for your customers, you may want to look at the number of unique customers that are paying with Snap. You may want to look at average transaction amount. How they heard about the program is a really important metric to collect, so you can see how effective your outreach efforts are. You could look at folks who are coming several times, repeat visitors, collect some demographic information, and you might also want to do a bigger kind of customer satisfaction survey. For your vendors, you might be thinking about the amount of Snap that was redeemed at their booth. You may also want to look at the impact of the revenue from Snap and how that has impacted their operations. So maybe they've expanded their growing operations, or they've hired some more staff because of the demand that's been created by the Snap program. You may want to look at what types of products are purchased with Snap, and looking at your kind of food mix in your market and where the energy is going there. For your market overall, you might want to look at just the economic impact of Snap. So what percentage of, if you have some sales data from your vendors, what percentage of all those sales are from Snap? You might want to look at what community partnerships you've been able to form, how far away people are traveling from to use Snap at their market, and any sort of data that you need for funding. So data collection for Snap programs, really thinking about how to go about doing that. It can be as simple as pen and paper, or as complex as real-time apps like FM Tracks, or some of the other types of data collection applications. You can test out a few different systems to find something that works well for your customers and your vendors and your staff. But really, you want to find something that works well for folks and is sustainable. And then finally, data was meant to be shared. So don't collect anything that you don't have a plan for using. And as you're creating your surveys or determining what metrics collect, ask yourself how that data will speak to the SNAP program's process or impact, and how you'll share that back with the community. So that's really it for the promotion and evaluation piece. And thank you all so much. I don't know if you want to say any closing words, Katie.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I just want to close by reminding you of the Farm Direct guide site Farm Direct Incentives guide site that we mentioned earlier, as well as the Farmers Market Coalition SNAP guide on our website. These are both great spaces to start your process of learning about what you might not know or what you might have more questions about. And then I encourage you to reach out to markets in your community to ask them about their experiences starting a SNAP program and get some insights from how they set it up. And don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here to help. So yeah, thanks for your time with us today, and good luck. And we hope to hear from you.